Alright, hi Year 11. This video is going to focus on the first dot point under management approaches, and we are going to look at the classical approach. We're going to look at some theories and some important people behind this. We're then going to look at classical management as planning, organising and controlling. We're going to look at the hierarchical organisational structure, so we're going to look at a pyramid and the breakup of the lines of communication and chain of command, and then we're going to look at the leadership style, which is autocratic, which links with the classical approach. So make sure you have your digital table open as we're working through. Alright, pretty much the classical approach focuses on improving employee output. So we are linking mainly to productivity, okay, and trying to get the most amount of units of output from each employee. So we have some theories or theorists that have influenced this classical and scientific management approach. And this kind of focuses around this term bureaucracy. So if you have not come across this term before, highlight it, and I've got a definition coming up. We are looking at management in terms of a clear designated hierarchy, so clear lines of who is in control, management clearly identified, and there being regulated steps of who is in charge of who. There are clear lines of communication going through this hierarchy, and labour is divided, so certain parts of the employee workforce will look after certain tasks, and it's very segmented. Employees will be evaluated and will be monitored in terms of their level of output and productivity, and employers or managers will keep formal records about their employees, okay? So, bureaucratic leaders rely on rules and regulations. They have clearly defined positions. So there is clear boundaries and clear responsibilities. You are likely, if you're a manager or employed in a firm that has this style, you report to your immediate supervisor. Okay, so you don't go ahead. There's not many people that you report to. There's clearly one leader or one boss that you report to. And these organisational roles are very, very straightforward, very clear, and therefore managers with this style don't generally step outside of this, and it's very difficult for them. The first approach that we're going to look at is FAILS, and this is about planning, organising and controlling, and this idea of controlling is really important. There is general discipline, so there is requirements, consequences, that type of stuff. There is this goal orientation as well, and we have some rewards. Now these rewards, and you might want to annotate this, can be monetary, okay, in terms of bonuses, or non-monetary, which can link to working conditions and so on. Taylor's approach is quite different. Now, Taylor was around in the 1800s, so we're looking around the Industrial Revolution period, and this is a very classical approach. We are looking at production lines, so specific tasks, and those tasks would be repeated by certain employees. So, Taylor saw the need to examine tasks and break down their components. Engage workers in selection based, so they are working in the area where their skills are most developed. There is this idea of cooperation, but the main idea is to divide work, okay, with management leading, coordinating and controlling. So this idea of controlling, okay, being very clear with the expectations and the responsibilities is coming through in Taylor's approach as well. This is where we see this idea of production lines. So we know that has been common in the car manufacturing industry, and it still actually is in place today, this idea of a production line. So old school, one worker, this bloke here, he would be highly specialised at doing one process, and he would do this process over and over and over. So he would become very efficient at it, okay, but we know that there are disadvantages when a worker is asked to do a repeat task without there being any room for movement. So there were tight controls. There were managers and bosses supervising. There were rules and regulations, okay, so really important that you have a clear understanding of Taylor's approach. So what you need to do now is you need to pause here and you need to compare and contrast Frederick Taylor's ideas, okay, and you might want to present this in a Venn diagram. You can do this straight into your notes, okay, or you can do it in your workbook, your choice. So pause now and have a go at this. All right. We are now going going to look at management as planning, organising and controlling, and this is as per the syllabus. So the first one we're going to look at is planning, and we have 3 types of plans: strategic plans, tactical plans and operational plans. Once the business goals have been determined, and we've already looked at this in class, decisions need to be made about how you are going to achieve them. So this how word is really important because how here means the process, okay? And this process needs plans. Now, I'm going to ask you to pause here, read this side yourself, okay? I'm not going to go through them. And you need to make notes on these in your table, please. All right. The second is organising. Now, the organisational process is the range of activities that translate the goals of a business into reality. So organising is about determining what, who and how these activities are going to be done. So this is about organising those resources, organising those inputs to ensure that outcomes and outputs are created. So in here, we determine what work needs to be done. We classify activities. We might look at specialisation of labour or who is doing what. We look at assigning work, so delegating certain responsibilities to certain individuals. Yet again, this idea of there being an authoritarian figure, okay, or a boss or a clear manager who is in charge of monitoring and ensuring that the work is done that has been assigned, okay? So these two are linked here. The next one is controlling, and controlling is the process of evaluating. Okay, so that word there is really important, evaluating performance. Now remember, to evaluate performance, we're going to need to look at what was hoped for and what has actually eventuated. And taking corrective action. So this is fixing something up if it wasn't done well, okay, or improving on something that is possibly going okay but not as good as what you first thought. So this is to ensure that the set objectives are being achieved, okay? So this is post those activities and those productions going on in a business, okay? So controlling is a part of management which allows change to be made. So they can establish standards, they can measure performance, and this is a really important one. So you're measuring actual to expected, and therefore you can make changes and alter processes where necessary if you are the manager. This is a really nice little diagram. It's from your textbook. It's the control process. You might want to screenshot this and put it in your notes. Okay, it's just more of a visual representation of the slide before. We're now going to look at the organisational structure, and Adam Smith was a really strong advocate for the division of labour to increase production and productivity. Okay, a classical management approach will see a specialisation of labour, so that's that production line approach where employees become highly skilled at one task and therefore their productivity improves. They are able to increase their output because they are becoming highly skilled. So this diagram clearly shows what a classical organisational structure would look like. There are many layers, okay, and what we would call a long chain of command. So you might need to write that down, a long chain of command. Many layers of management, board of directors, managing director, department head, plant manager, store manager, team manager, supervisor. So to communicate, it needs to go through lots and lots of different individuals. So a really long chain of command. Now, if you're at the top, obviously you have greater accountability, greater responsibility, and greater authority. But if you're just a worker down the bottom, okay, you have less accountability and less responsibility as well. So yet again, a good diagram. Don't just put in a diagram in your notes. Make sure that you are explaining it. Okay, and this section here is more about the roles or the requirements of these people. Okay, so this is what they would do. This is what they're in charge of. So with this pyramid-shaped organisational structure, we see rigid lines of communication. We see many layers of management. Okay, we see clearly distinguished positions, roles and responsibilities. We see specialisation because jobs are divided into separate tasks. And we see, as I said before, a fairly long chain of command. So you might want to add that descriptive word in there, okay? So with this classical management structure, we see a division of labour, okay? There are defined communication channels. Information comes from above. So it's more about telling workers what to do, not asking them for their input. and we'll see that compared later on in the other approaches. The last section of the syllabus asks you to look at autocratic, and this is looking at an autocratic leadership style where we look at this reward and punishment or reward and consequence system, and it is a way of controlling employees or trying to create or have a certain type of behaviour result. So a manager using an autocratic leadership will make the decisions, will dictate work methods, will limit worker knowledge. Workers will not be involved in the decision-making process. If they do give feedback, it's punitive, it's not meaningful. So they make decisions, they control workers, they use motivation but through threats, they use negative feedback. So your best example of this is Gordon Ramsay. Okay, many of you would have seen him on TV. Okay, he is very, very autocratic, and he communicates in a way that you would not say is very democratic at all. So this, I suppose, is a really good scale. Yet again, put this in your notes or something like that, where we are down here at this end of the scale when we're looking at our classical management structure. Managements make the decisions. They are authoritarian. They do not ask for or encourage employees to become involved. Now, this management strategy, although it sounds quite negative from a contemporary perspective, it actually has a fair bit of benefits. Okay, worker productivity is the main benefit from here. Okay, you see workers become very productive and the results are very measurable. Your labour, your workers will become specialised, okay, and there are clear lines of communication and clear lines of authority. The focus of this is about profit and money. Now, it is a fairly old school approach, okay, no doubting it, but in the right workplace and in the right situation, it can lead to fairly high levels of profit and growth. But there are obvious weaknesses, and specialisation of labour generates boredom. People become disempowered. They lose their motivation, and eventually they lose job satisfaction. We start to see increased absenteeism, and obviously the output in the longer term can begin to decline. As a management or a leadership style, autocracy is very inflexible, okay? It only works in very stable and predictable organisations, which we know the 21st century business environment is not this, okay? Management and employees in this classical theory don't always get along, okay? And often employees are feeling separated and not valued within this type of management. So, the last thing I need you to do is pause now and come up with some types of modern organisations that you think this approach would work in. You'll go through this in class, make sure you have all the other activities done, and thanks, Year 11.